Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Decently interesting week. Of course, the biggest news that came out was the dev blog that showed some of the balance changes that CCP is planning for the game. Basically, gutting ECM quite a bit, taking out a lot of the 1v1 potential of that weapon system. Quite some changes to interceptors as well, to at least the four most combat capable interceptors. Yeah, a lot of hubbub about the changes to the dictors for wormhole space. And so as a result, I am a little bit curious to see what all of that brings to the market. I myself have been having a pretty good week. I enjoy the current event and I in fact have already earned all 4 skins for the Rogue Drone event at the moment. As always, we'll start with a quick look at the new Eden store. At the moment, I'm not seeing any sales or anything all too special here. The hot one, Hila Hostile Takeover skin for just 110 plex, that is actually pretty okay. It's a super popular ship, of course. Almost everyone will have at least a Hila lying around for events and for the Abyss if they enjoy doing that. And yeah, just 110 plex for a permanent skin is not so bad, but there are no massive sales or anything like that happening at the moment. There is this bundle of Tengu Ultra Jungle that I'm seeing here. The reason why is because this is actually the gift I think that I got last week from someone else as well in my redeemable items. I think it was both these Tengu skins. So yeah, pretty good. Talking about gifts, someone gave me another Blueprint original for the Orca. Awesome gift, thank you very much, because there's never enough supply of the BPCs there. It just takes a long time, about a week, to make a BPC in my facility, and as a result I'll be able to supply more demand and make more ISK from my Blueprint copy business yet again. So pretty damn awesome. But overall we are here for the market, of course, so let's get started. As always, we'll start with Plex and stuff at 225. Like that. And yep, let's get going here. Plex in GTA itself, just above 3 million for the sellers, just below 3 million for the buyers. If we go to the player owned trade hubs, actually a surprisingly low amount of difference between sellers and buyers. And if we go for between sellers in GTA and sellers in the player-owned trade hubs. Same thing with the buyers here, so very narrow. The buyers just below 3 million, these sellers just above 3 million at 3,037,000 ISK. If we take a look at the chart here, we are on the ascent most of the time. You can see that on the averages we are selling Plex or trading Plex for just above 3 million ISK, and I think that that will become something that the market will defend, especially the sellers. They'll be very hesitant to pull Plex back below 3 million, and unless CCP comes out with another sale, I do think that inflationary forces can take over, and that this will basically become a bottom that will be heavily defended by the market. That's my personal expectation, of course. I don't have the actual crystal ball that will tell us the future. Next up we have the multiple pilot training certificate. Same story here, 5-day moving average, clearly still moving up, and we have already passed, I think, the 1.2 billion mark at this point. Yeah, 1.2 billion, just above that by in fact 29 million for the sellers, and just below 1.2 billion again for the buyers as well. Note here, 1230 for GTA, 1228, 1229 in fact for the sellers in player owned trade hubs. Very narrow margin, so very heavy competition at the moment for people trying to unload the multiple pilot training certificate and the Plex, and the buyers as well are very close together, which is a rather unusual situation. It's something that of course we don't have that many years experience with the player owned trade hubs trying to take business from GTA 4.4, and players sometimes, you know, willing to accept a very large margin between those two, and now all of a sudden we're seeing this very narrow margin on this increase in price. It's definitely, I think, a pattern that we should take note of and that we have to keep in mind when we do our trading, whether we do it in GTA or in those player-owned trade hubs. Next up we have the skill extractors. We're going to see the same pattern as Plex, except for one little hesitation bump down here. I think it was a sale from CCP that kept the price below 330, but the jump up towards 350 has definitely been made. We're now selling them for 344 million ISK, buyers coming in at 336, and again note that the top seller is in fact in JITA 44, competing with all these player-owned trade hubs that then go up to 348, and then JITA takes over as well, but it's from 344 to 348. That's actually again a very narrow margin between JITA and the player-owned trade hubs. So there's definitely some competition happening here. The market does seem to be hesitating to jump straight to more than 350 million ISK, but as I've said, now it's all about what CCP will announce for the winter, and if they can drum up enough hype, then I definitely expect an increase in price, similar to what we see if we take the cutoff point here about a year ago. You can clearly see the run up in price towards mid-December, with a peak here at 400 million. We can quickly take a look at Plex here as well. Here is the peak right before January, and then the multiple power trading certificates actually were already peaking now. So, and you can also see that the multiple power trading certificates have a bit more volatility to them than Plex and the skill extractors, but this is definitely very interesting. And I think if you remember a couple of weeks ago, maybe even more than a couple of weeks ago, one of the viewers said that they had dumped a lot of ISK in Plex and it was at this bottom, and it was apparently right to do so. If these charts here are any predictor for what's going to happen for Plex and extractors, he'll have made a very good purchase at that point. Now for the skill injectors next, let's take a look at that. We are finally hitting bottom here at 700 million for the large skill injector on the chart. Sellers are coming in at 707 million, buyers are coming in at 688 million ISK. Here we do see a bit more of a gap. 717 in JITA, 707 in the player-owned trade hubs, and you can clearly see now that those lower prices are dominated by the player-owned trade hubs. Same thing with the buyers coming in at 688 in the player stations, and we have to go all the way down here at 684 for JITA itself, and that's the big difference here. We've got this downward spiral, we have these bottoms forming, and now you do clearly see the difference between the traders that are basically doing their own trades in the trade hubs and those in JITA 44. It's a very important pattern. I'm not really sure yet how we could take advantage of that, but it's something that we clearly have to keep an eye out for as well, because it might have some sort of a predictor prediction capability to it if we can see that margin narrow or increase again to see what the market is actually deciding on these items. So for the small scale injector, same thing. We can clearly see that the bottom is forming here, quite a weird bottom, but we are talking about 142 million for the sellers, 140 for the buyers, and again we have to go up to 149 all of a sudden for JITA sellers, and then we have to go up. No, actually here the buyers are competing, so that is something to keep in mind again as well with the first uptick in these small skill injectors. I personally do think that if you're still looking to make those investments, if you're not ready and it's a bit too late, if in your opinion, for Plex, skill extractors and the trading certificates, that looking into the skill injector market might be the right time. Next up, we've got the daily alpha injectors taking an increase in price, and we actually broke 55 million on the downside just a couple of weeks ago. Now we are well above that, back on the higher end of the average. I would say 56 million for the first seller, 60 million for most of them, 55 million for the buyers. Yeah, definitely buyers at 55 million indicate that we are slightly above average, I would say, for the daily alpha injectors. Next up, we have the minerals at 910. Like that, and let's get started. More bad news for titanium, just continuing to decline back to an average price. At this point, I would definitely understand hesitation when it comes to selling. At 562 for the first seller, buyers are coming in at 546, 5.5, as I've said, you know, around the average price. That's where the market is trying to put up a little bit of a defense. The chart has just broken straight through that, but I do think that we will not break 5 ISK all too quickly. The reason for that is that there are some war drums beating just from reading Reddit, despite the fact that the Imperium has still made some sort of a deal for, what was it, 40 faction citadels in exchange for non-aggression for like 6 months or something like that. Turns out that apparently their allies can still hunt those guys down, and yeah, there might still be some action and some actual losses there that will stem the bleeding when it comes to the Tritanium price here. It's my expectation that we will stay above 5 ISK, and as long as we are above that, I personally feel like it's okay to sell. It's not the best time to sell, of course, but you're still working with that normal average price that is, I think, a decent ISK per hour for the Tritanium that you get out of your mining. For Pyrite, that's a little bit different because we are moving to apparently another leg down, now substantially below 4 ISK on the chart, and it doesn't look like we're going anywhere. 390 for the first sellers, 379 for the buyers, and despite that, you can clearly see that we're still going from 4 ISK to 390 with almost 600 million units, 200 million here, 200 million units here. That's and another 660 million. Those are still really big numbers. The market just cannot absorb the amount of pyrite that is being produced at the moment. For Mexilon, same story as with Tritanium. We are definitely continuing that correction after an increase in price thanks to the war. Now 65 is going to be the interesting one in my opinion. 66.5 for the seller, 65.01 for the highest buyer, but many of them are trying to drag the price back below that. I think that 65 ISK is very similar to 5 ISK for Tritanium. That's still an okay price as long as we stay above that, but once we get below that, look out, you're clearly going below the entire chart, and that I think would be the price where I would stop selling my own Mexilon. So the other danger, in my opinion, if we see Mexilon break through, I think the market might just give up on defending 5 ISK for Tritanium as well, because that would indicate massive oversupply at the moment. So be careful when it comes to that. We're already close to 65 ISK. In fact, you're just selling for 66.5, which I would say is already below average. 70 should be your average. Still just okay for selling Mexilon, but don't go too much lower. Otherwise, you will start to, I think, just give your mining time away for almost nothing. Next up, we've got Isogen, and yeah, this is, I think, one of those indicators that we are definitely oversupplied in general. For almost 3 months now, we have been at bottom prices, rock bottom prices of just above 25 ISK for Isogen, but it is completely unstoppable. We just broke through that on the downside on the Isogen market here. 24.11 for the sellers of Isogen, 23.12 for the buyers of Isogen. I mean, it had to move some way at some point, and it clearly seems to be that there's just even more production at the moment than what the market can absorb. I think that's going to be bad news for Noxium, and nope, to my surprise, Noxium is making a bit of a bounce to 300 ISK, from 300 ISK to a little bit above that. This is a surprise to me. 328 for the sellers, 314 for the buyers. But to be honest, considering what Isogen is doing, considering the pressure we're seeing on pyrite, considering the correction in Mexilon here, when it comes to this Noxium, I would just take this opportunity. If you can still sell this stuff at a profit right now, I would do so, and I would run the hell away, because I think that with Isogen breaking through that 25 ISK barrier, it's only going to be a matter of time before Noxium also breaks through that 300 barrier, and that this becomes the new normal range, 250 to 300. I still see that happening. I see no reason why Noxium would be any different from what the general trend in the market is. Next up, we have Zydrine. Same thing, slow landing, but just, you know, trying to defend 500 ISK. Nope, we're gonna go below that. Now we are selling for 457 ISK, and the buyers are coming in at 450, and so that is basically the next psychological barrier. Will we get Zydrine below 450? If that happens, yeah, look out below yet again. And for Megasite is actually the next one that we want to check. We also have this little bit of a leg down, 1 year low point yet again, 538 for the sellers, 500.25 for the buyers. Now, if you're playing the very long game, then all of these charts look really enticing to buy on. I do understand that. But personally, my approach to the mineral market is that stuff like megasite, if I happen to mine it myself, I'll just stockpile it for a better day. I do check it every week anyways in EveTalk. I'm still selling on opportunities for Mexlon. In fact, even now, if I would need any liquid disk, I would still sell my titanium because of the price compared to the rest of the chart. But keeping in mind what's happening with Isogen here, keep this entire chart in mind. This is just crazy. And for the longer term, this might actually be the right time to buy. But it remains very risky because, of course, it's mining itself that has changed in the game. Morphite bouncing from 9,000 ISK or even below that, and is apparently making another move up. Yeah, 9,600 ISK for the sellers, 9,000 ISK for the buyers. Is this a buy opportunity? I personally don't think so. The general trend across the board for mining is down. And I think that this little spike for Morphite will not last too long. Next up, PI at 1545. Like that, and let's get started. Broadcast nodes here at the tail end, bit of pressure, and then today actually an average that is slightly higher. So how close are we to 2 million? 2.1 million for the sellers, 2 million for the buyers. We're still hovering at that lower end, so it's okay if you still need some broadcast nodes or want to buy some broadcast nodes for who knows what structure might come out next. Then have the patience for a buy order, but then you're definitely grabbing them for a good price. Construction blocks continuing the descent, 1 year low point all of a sudden. That is, in my opinion, very interesting. 10,900 for the sellers, but 10,000 ISK for the buyers. If you look at 10,000 ISK on the chart, that is obviously the 1 year low point. If you're looking for that PI investment, I think construction blocks makes a lot of sense. Consumer electronics hovering at an okay range, a bit below average probably for the chart, but 12,900 for the sellers and 11,700 for the buyers. It's not the same as what we're seeing with construction blocks, but it is below average. For the coolants, fuel related, that's a very nice little climb back above 11,000 ISK. Not sure if we'll maintain that, but we're clearly trading at a decent range now. 11,200 for the sellers, 10,800 for the buyers, average around 11k, which is quite alright. Definitely a good price. And for me, who prefers stability, when it comes to my personal productions, making coolants makes a lot of sense. It's fuel related, it gets constantly consumed by the market and by the general economy. As a result, you tend to be able to command slightly higher prices and more stable prices. And at the moment, it does look like coolants is going for around 11,000 ISK, which if you look at this entire chart is definitely a great price. Historically speaking, is slightly above average price. So this is definitely very good for PI producers that don't go completely overboard. It is just a single gas planet. You're making coolants. Very easy to do, very doable for almost anyone. Enriched uranium back above 12,500 ISK, so that's the same story basically. 13,000 for the sellers, 12,969 for the buyers. That's in fact 13,000 ISK now all of a sudden for enriched uranium, which is an above average price. Definitely a great time to sell that as well. Why the premium? It's a bit trickier to make enriched uranium on a single planet compared to coolants, which is very doable on the very common gas planets. Integrity response drones next, just continuing to hover as well around the 2.5 million mark. The real question is the buyers, 2.4 million. So that's not like a drastic new bottom or an incredibly notable buy opportunity, but it is still okay to grab some of these advanced PI materials at the current prices. Mechanical parts, bit of a seesaw between 11 and 12,000 ISK. Which means that at the moment we're at the high end, 12,400 for the sellers, 11,800 for the buyers. This is a little bit surprising to me. Mechanical parts is just as easy to produce as coolants. It's on barren planets, which is pretty much as common, but you're getting a bit more bang for your buck for mechanical parts at the moment. The nuclear reactors are trying to get back above 110,000 ISK, and they are 110 No, just below that, in fact, 110,000 for the sellers, 93,000 for the buyers. That's the bad news when nuclear reactors have this kind of volatility, which spikes up to 180 and 130. What we saw, of course, was the buyers give way and move their buy orders closer and up above 100,000 ISK. That's when you've got room for a big spike. It's just not happening at the moment. And so nuclear reactors is, in my opinion, lacking some volatility for active trading. Organic mortar applicators, same thing. Sometimes we're touching $1 million on average on a day. Most of the time around 1.1 million. So the sellers are at 1.1, the buyers just above $1 million. It's okay to grab these again. Not super pronounced. Robotics, that's a bit of a different story all of a sudden. Fuel related as well. Managed to spike up to 110,000 ISK. Now, for the first time in quite a bit, below 100,000 ISK on the chart. Sellers at 101, buyers at 97,000, and this does indicate, I think, slight oversupply. You can also see in the last couple of days, lots of supply coming in, lots of competition coming in, driving the price for robotics on average down a little bit. It's still possible to make robotics on a single planet, and I do think that if you can do it, if you happen to find, I think it's a plasma planet in your system, I think it's worth to do that, because it's definitely, you know, you get that premium for going from what is it, a refined to a specialized PI material. It's also much smaller to produce, so you can make for a lot longer and then dump it on the market at the right time. But right now, apparently, strangely enough, coolant's up, mechanical parts up, but the robotics slightly under pressure. Self-harmonizing power cores, same thing here, meandering around 2 million. The buyers are at 2 million. You know, not much to say about that. The advanced PI materials, if you want to make that prep, definitely it's still the time to do so. Superconductors, slight jump up and now hesitating to go even higher, 12,500, 12,400 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. What is notable here is the white margin. The chart indicates that it's the sellers that are dictating the price at the moment, and it's an average price for superconductors. Test cultures next, crawling out of the hole, but ever so slowly, staying below 9,000 ISK here, 8,750 for the sellers, 8,000 for the buyers. Your buy opportunity is over, but it's still not a great price. It's still a bit below average. And then we've got the wetware mainframes that last week went pretty damn low, close to 2.1 million. Buyers are still just above that, but not by much. So yeah, advanced PI material, there's really not that much to say. It's continuing to be under pressure, and it seems to me like the market is still hesitating, right? Will the next set of structure require these materials or not? Nobody knows. And as a result, we have this slightly oversupplied. There's a bit of pressure on the price all the time. But there is no pronounced crash or anything like that either. I think that there will always be some people that will grab these on these low ends. You can then see some volume increases. So there's always a little bit of a response to any opportunity in these, which is keeping us from having a really awesome deal on advanced PI materials. But at the same time, the uncertainty is keeping people from making major moves as well. Next up, advanced moon materials. 23 minutes, let's say. Give myself a little bit of breathing room here. And I think if I remembered last week, we started to see some pressure on most of them. The carbonites generally were already pretty low. We're starting to see that translate in the metamaterials, and then the other stuff like fermionic condensates, ferrogel, that was actually holding on at very high prices, at year high prices. In fact, for some of them, we're also showing signs of pressure. So let's see if that's continuing. I would say that stability in nullsec is usually the trigger for that pattern. And well, I did see more political and nullsec war related stuff happening on Reddit, but the big part, of course, was that I think the Imperium was paid off as well. So let's see if this translates to more stability or not. For crystalline carbonites, very flat at a less than average price. 160 for the sellers and 160.59 for the buyers. I would say that this is still something, if you have the longer horizon, I would dare buy some more crystalline carbonate at less than 160, then invest in minerals, to be honest. But this would be where I would put my longer term investments at the moment. Ferrite carbide, that is continuing to descend, and we are now clearly heading towards a 1-year low point of around 155, 158 for the sellers, but 149 for the buyers. So in the last couple of weeks, it was always, I think, crystalline carbonate that was flat at that pretty low price. That was my pick. This week I'm definitely grabbing ferrite carbide for close to 150. Look at the entire chart. That's just a great price to I think try to buy at. Next up we have titanium carbide, not at the 1-year low point just yet, but clearly below average as well, selling for 180, 190 basically, and 183 or just below that for the buyers. That's definitely a possibility as well, because you can see that 150 never really comes into play. And tungsten carbide, not the same massive drop to 175, but again 225 to 250 on average. We are obviously below that, and it looks like some people might already have been making some moves with that increased volume yesterday. 220 for the sellers, 207 for the buyers, 207. Let's see if we can get that around here. Yeah, definitely also. In my opinion, all of these carbides are very interesting, and the chart makes this ferrite carbide look really interesting with that volatility down right there, and buyers I think below 150. Yeah, exactly. Next up we have the metamaterials. Here are the photonic metamaterials. That pressure is starting to shine through, but it's a slow process. We're obviously not at a 1-year low point, but we've broken through that 20k barrier. 19,650 for the sellers, 18,600 for the buyers. Is it the right time to buy at 18,600? I would say it's a bit too early to grab your metamaterials, but it's also heading for a less than average price as well, especially on the buyers here. Next up, the plasmonic metamaterials. Bit of hesitation here, staying above 20,000 ISK. 21,000 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers. So to be honest, here I would not make a move just yet. Then we have the nonlinear metamaterials. Does break through 30k, but that's obviously above average. So we're seeing that pressure here. 29,000 for the sellers, 28,000 for the buyers. It's starting to show through here as well. But this one was well above average, so you know that's another no for me. And then 4.4 terahertz metamaterials, that looks a lot more interesting because we are playing with 20,000 ISK, which is the bottom for this material chart. 21,000 for the sellers, 19,800 for the buyers. If you are looking for a metamaterials investment, it would obviously be the terahertz metamaterials in my opinion. And then the other stuff, so very interesting. I think honestly the carbides showing all that pressure, and now here the terahertz showing the first potential. I think we can expect the trend on all of these to be down as well. I think I have to decide on at least some investments in that, because if a winter war does break out, and generally in EVE Online we do have some winter action, then this could be very interesting as an investment. For the other advanced moon material stuff, here we've got fermionic condensates continuing the pressure, breaking through 100,000 ISK, I think. Yep, 99.6 for the sellers, 95,900 for the buyers. Very slow process, but you can clearly see that you know, with highs of 110,000 ISK, breaking through 100,000 ISK here now, the pressure is on, and it looks a little bit different than all of this volatility here. This does look like it's a general trend here, more stability, more supply, and as a result the prices slowly go down. Ferrogel, same thing, breaking through 50,000 ISK. Not yet anything too crazy. It's not like we're playing with 1-year lows just yet, but we can clearly see that the pattern has been broken here. Fullerite, are we below 1,000 ISK on the sellers? Just not, but the buyers at 900 ISK, they want to go even lower, and that is starting to look almost interesting, right? 900 ISK for the buyers of Fullerites, potentially. If you are looking for that investment so far. In the other moon materials, advanced moon materials, this one looks the most interesting. We've got hypersynaptic fibers, again showing the pressure, but not yet breaking through 12,500, so I don't think that any real buy opportunities exist there. Nanotransmitters, same downtrend, now landing at 5,000 discs, maybe slightly below average, but you can see that pressure again on the price. Phenolic composites last week still doing okay. The one that was still definitely in the sell order territory is now trying to go to less than 3,000 disc, and look at that, it's happening. 1 million units coming in at less than 3,000 disc. This is going to drive the buyers down, I think, and you don't need that much to get rid of 2940, 2930, 2921, and then look at that, less than 2.9 thousand is coming into view pretty damn quickly. Just a couple 100,000, like 500,000 units, and you are there. And this 1 million units here is going to, I think, entice some sellers at least to follow those orders. And then, yeah, we're talking 2,900 or below. I mean, it still has to make its move down to a more average price, I think, but that the pressure here is pretty obviously visible. Ceramic fibers, very same pattern, coming towards 450, so that's still too early. Buyers are still hesitating to drive the price even lower, but yeah, it's the full alright, I think, with their buyers at 900 disc that are showing the way, and that is your one buy opportunity, in my opinion, for the other materials. So very interesting week, I would say, in the advanced move materials for people looking to make investments. The general pressure trend is obviously visible practically across the board, and yeah, it's all about timing the bottoms now, of course, which is very tricky to do. But then I always say, don't buy with all your risk. Always try to have some room to lower your averages once you've decided on an investment. This one, I like this chart a lot. Next up, we have the Tech 2 ships at 30.45. Like that, we are going to go over these. These should come under pressure as well. And look at that, the air is jumping up. Oh god, I can't. I'm so bad with names. That is something that I do have to apologize for. So I'm not going to be able to tell you guys like with absolute certainty which interceptors are going to keep their bubble immunity and which ones are going to lose it. But if we look at the market action, then I would say that the Aries is gonna keep it, and as a result, that one is up in price to above 30 million again. 31 million for the sellers, 27.4 for the buyers. Very interesting. The Basilisk is now back down, and in fact to 30 on average, to 48 for the sellers, to 23 for the buyers, to 23 for the buyers. That is starting to be interesting, but again, let's keep the previous segment in mind. Materials are under pressure. Who knows how low we could go? Who knows if we start to, for instance, move in the 200 to 250 range rather than 230 to 280 to even 300 million is for the Basilisk. So we are clearly seeing some below average price all of a sudden in some of these Tech 2 ships, but I personally am a little bit wary of making massive purchases at the moment. Cerberus, though, that is obviously close to a 1-year low point. That is very interesting. 218 for the sellers, 201 for the buyers, 200 million for a Cerberus. That has been a long time since we've had that opportunity. So especially if you want to buy some of these, I would highly recommend that you do so. But this one is also showing that the potential, for instance, for the Basilisk would be to land again on 200 million as well. So be careful, but yeah, if you're looking for that investment, I would say Cerberus makes sense for the entire 1-year perspective. This is the lowest it's been since about a year ago. The claw is dropping off, so I'm going to assume that the claw is going to lose its bubble immunity, and that is quite a punishment. 26.8 million for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. That market has obviously cratered all of a sudden, which is going to, of course, make a big difference between those two interceptors. And the travel scepters, I think, will remain interesting. And I basically do think that the meta and the player base might just give CCP a little bit of the finger on this change here and just decide, you know what, then we're going to start doing these fleets with the best possible interdictor immune interceptor rather than the claws. They're just going to go by the wayside. So they may need a bit of a buff to counter this. Next up here we've got the Crow. Alright, couldn't even tell you exactly what's happening here. So we've got, it's either the Crow or is it the Raptor? Yeah, the Raptor dropped off, so I'm going to assume here, not entirely sure, definitely correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think that the Crow is going to keep the bubble interdiction. The big surprise here is that one is going down in price a little bit. 31.4 million for the sellers, 30.6 for the buyers. It's still above 30 million though. Is that a missile ship? Yeah, missile. I'm quite surprised that this one is not moving up then, because that would still mean a bubbly immune interceptor with missiles, which should be pretty awesome. Does it have like terrible stuff for launchers? Still, you can still do some stuff with this. And then the Raptor is crashing to less than 30. Well, that's, man, these interceptor, these Galdari ships are not making it easy. This one only has, that's almost impossible, micro small hybrid turrets. Okay, so yeah, definitely I'm hesitating here between the Crew and the Raptor to actually figure it out, and I'm a little bit too lazy to go and check at this point. But so the Crow slightly down in price, but still costing well above 30 million ISK. Then we've got the Crusader dropping off massively. A more interceptor buyers at 14 million, sellers at 24 million. So I think that last week we were already talking about we're getting below 30 million. Should we make a move? Should we not? Well, if CCP intervenes, of course, then this is the reaction that you can get. Nobody wants Crusaders anymore. Then we've got the Guardian hesitating at 230 to 250. Are we seeing supply pressure? Well, maybe a little bit. 245 for the sellers, 222 for the buyers. Next up, we've got the Heretic. Same thing at the lower end of the average. Definitely seeing a bit of pressure, I think, from the materials, but nothing too drastic like what we saw with the Cerberus. Then next, we've got the Hound. I like that. That looks okay. Some prices close to 25 million. Where are these buyers at? 25.5 million, 29 million for the sellers. This is obviously a bit of a pullback that is lower than what we're used to. Just above 25 for the buyers. I would say if you're looking for that frigate investment, then the Hound makes a lot of sense with this chart. The Ishtar, same thing actually. 1 year low point coming to less than 250, 251 for 251 million for the sellers, but 236 million for the buyers. Also an opportunity in my opinion, especially if you like to fly these ships. The Manticore also finally breaking, no, not breaking to 30 million just yet, but definitely seeing the pressure here. Where are those buyers? 29.5 for the buyers of a Manticore, 33 million still for the sellers. Healthy margin. 1 year low point when it comes to the buy prices. Makes a lot of sense to me. Hound, Manticore, those would be on my purchase list. Nemesis landing at less than 30 million ISK, and here that's when I say no. 26.4 million for the sellers, 28.8 million for the sellers, sorry, 26.4 for the buyers. That margin is lower than what we saw in the previous two ships. We know that 25 million is in the cards because it's not a 1 year low point yet. So I would say yes Hound, yes Manticore, no on the Nemesis so far. The Alneros is staying a bit above average, so that's a no for buying. The Purifier is showing some pressure as well. Where are those buyers? 28 million, 32 million for the sellers. That's a maybe. Still better than the Nemesis in my opinion, but also not yet at its 1 year low point on the chart. So I'm hesitating. I think it makes more sense to go for Hound and Manticore. Then we get the Raptor that we already saw dropping off to less than 30 million ISK bar. Still at 28 though, at 31 million. So I'm not really sure if it's the Raptor or the Crow that will lose its immunity. Then we've got the Saber showing some pressure, but nothing too drastic. Scimitar, yeah, if the buyers are below 200 million, but they're not, just above that at 201. So here I'm hesitating. You could definitely, I think, if you buy at 200 million, make a good deal out of that. But if the Cerberus is any real indication, we're going to start to move to a lower threshold. Be careful with jumping the gun too soon. If you see a chart here, then I think we're more likely to be buying at like 190 or 195 than just above 200. Stiletto next, that one is then taking off, of course, replacing the Crow as the immune one. Went from less than 30 million ISK, now all of a sudden costing 34 million, and a buyer is willing to pay 32.5 million. The CCP effect is real. The Taranis, poor Taranis, completely breaking down as well. It's not as bad as the Amar one, but 26 million for the sellers, 24 million for the buyers. That one is probably no longer bubble immune here. So interesting week. I'm seeing some opportunities. I like the Crow, I like the Hound, and I like the Manticore. The Ishtar as well, that is pretty low. But that Manticore is quite a surprise. When you look at this entire chart, the volatility of this downtrend, and then those buyers at less than 30 million, I would say, yeah, I'd try to grab 3 of them, spend $1 million, and then hope to sell them back at anywhere from 35 to 40 million for some nice profits. We've not seen that opportunity, look at this chart, to buy Manticores for less than 30 million in quite a while. Next up, the Tech Tree ships at 39.30. Keep going. Like that. Here, let's start with, as always, the destroyers. Bit of pressure. This is personally what I am fearing. More supply, more pressure. 33.3 for the sellers, 31 almost for the buyers. Several hundred still parked at 33.5, and that competition is coming in. So the more supply comes in, the more pressure we'll see on the price. Will we have an opportunity at less than 30 million, just like we did in early July? I think it's possible. I personally still think that a September, maybe even early October bottom with the current trend is still possible. So it's okay to buy, right? Buy them for less than 31 million. I still think that that's a decent deal, but is it the very best deal? I think that there might be better opportunities brewing, especially if you see what just happened to the Tengu on the ticker, of course. The Hecate worked its way back above 40 million, but the pressure is already back on. And look at that 115 here, 242 coming in at 40 million. And here comes the competition with 44 and 36, driving the price of the sellers. So less than 40 million ISK, buyers at 38. Yeah, be careful of that oversupply, and definitely try to buy at the lowest possible price. Jackdaw hovering at 40 million, but look at the competition here. Also, that's several hundred more coming in, competing with these 500-600 at 40 million here all of a sudden. Buyers at 34.3, margin opening up as well. Not that huge numbers here on the buyer side of things. So yeah, if like a couple hundred more Jackdaws come in here, then, you know, 35 million here, 30 million here might come into play. So be careful. It's still looking okay, but personally I like the Confessor a bit more than both of these others. And then we've got this Vapel as well. That is same thing, right? Managed to work its way up towards, try to get to 40 million here, bit more here, but look at the pressure at the tail end. And now we see hundreds of them on all of these destroyers, and so anything new has to basically, you know, hover between all of these ships, and it'll constantly be pressure, in my opinion, on all of them. 36.5 million for the sellers, 33 million for the buyers, which is respectably low for this Vapel, but not yet, I think, the lowest point that's possible. Yep, so for the destroyers, I'm seeing now, you know, that there's a bit of a backlog that is causing problems, and any fresh supply is going to put pressure on those prices. Will we be able to create new buy opportunities close to 30 million? I can't say for sure, but I think I'll be patient enough and wait for that. Next up, we've got the cruisers showing that pressure as well. The Legion going for less than 150 now, 145. That's several hundred of them, with again the relisting and then the competition coming in with more supplies. Lack of demand is pretty obvious as well. Buyers at 136. Next up, we've got the Loki, same trend now, although for a much higher price because it's such a unique and good ship. 189 though for the sellers. So if we look for a couple hundred, it's at 190. But look at that competition, look at that fresh supply. It is definitely driving the sellers down, and the buyers, they're willing to be a bit patient, to ask for quite a nice premium. 176 for the Loki. Proteus, after a bit of a hump back up to 160 a couple of weeks ago, maybe 10-12 days. Look at the pressure here again. 140 for the sellers, 127 for the buyers. And then for the Tengu, basically 1 year low point on the chart, 130 on average. And it's the investors, I think the big holders that were impatient, relisting at 136, but look at that, 211 going down to 135 all of a sudden, 126 for the buyers. Yeah, these tech tree ships, I mean, at this point I would say if you're looking to buy any, it's buy a couple Tengus for less than 130 million. I think that makes most sense to just put those buy orders up and hope that you can snag a couple. But across the board, you're seeing that pressure, you're seeing that backlog of several hundred that is being relisted by presumably one or a couple of big players. But then you're seeing that the production is still there, the supply is still there, and it is competing, it is driving those prices even lower, because right now for this week, for the first time in a bit, I think, we are seeing that there is this backlog across the board. All of them have it, and so as long as there's no reason for demand to all of a sudden increase, like a big Nasdaq action or anything like that, I'm seeing more pressure in the upcoming weeks, and I'm seeing better buy opportunities than what we're seeing even now. So look for those 1 year low points. Here is the Tengu at the 1 year low point before you pull the trigger, in my opinion, on a tech tree investment. And then for the extra products, 44.45. Obviously, we have to look at some ECM ships, with ECM changing so much. For the people that don't yet know what that's all about, ECM is being changed so that the ECMing ship will still be targetable, and in fact, if you have it target, you will no longer lose the target. This does mean that it gets gutted quite a lot for small scale PvP. For the bigger fights, it still makes a lot of sense, because you can, for instance, use it on the enemy logistic ships, which will lose all other ships locked, and will only be able to do something against you. And so as a result, it still has that big fleet fight utility, but you no longer are stuck with doing absolutely nothing in a one-on-one if someone gets pretty lucky with their ECM landing a lot. So I think I put them in the ticker. That's gonna be the easiest way to look at these. Let's get started here with the Blackbird. Bit of pressure at the tail end. Where are those buyers at? 6.3 million, 6.5 million sellers coming in. Definitely driving the price down here all of a sudden. If you're willing to sell those for 6.5 million, you're not expecting too much for the Blackbird anymore. And so that's the ECM bonus right there. I also saw the Falcon, which is a Tech 2 ship. That could be a bit more interesting. Look at that all of a sudden. Here, it is the pattern that I was personally expecting for Tech 2 in general, right? Except that here we've got this massive delay before we see this volatility to crazy high price up to 350 million ISK. But basically, what I was expecting was we would hover at these higher prices for a while because of the moon mining changes in Tech 2 ships, but then we would in steps go back to a more normal price that we saw before all the moon mining changes. But here now the Falcon dropping off to 250 million, and the buyers are at 240, 255 for the sellers. Maybe the Falcon, does that still have this? Well, it's a Sino ship as well. It's not like it's the only bonus that it has, so maybe that's why the price is still holding strong, but it's definitely at the lower end for the last 6 months or so. Here is the Griffin, not that big of a move. It's of course only a small frigate that is basically super cheap, so don't expect a massive move there. Griffin Navy issue, does that have an ECM? Yes, it does. Bit of a dip here, but not by too much. Actually holding alright. I'm a bit surprised by that. Still 17.5 million for the sellers, 15.8 for the buyers. Next up we've got the Kitsune. Look at that. Not really a big move on that. 34 million for the sellers, 31 million for the buyers. Now we still have the Rook. The Rook did drop off quite a bit from 280 down to 250 at the moment, to 68 still though for the sellers. Buyers at 256. Seems to be, you know, not that big of a drop. And then we've got the Scorpion, that was already not doing too great as a Tech 1 Caldari battleship. It is currently being bought for 121, sellers at less than 130 million. And we also have the Widow. The widow is showing a bit of pressure, basically coming close to a 1-year low point. Buyers coming in at a bit below 1.1 billion, sellers at 1.1 billion. Not that big of a move on the ECM ships as what I expected, to be honest. So while all of these are low, they are not like seeing their bottom fall out completely. So the bigger move was actually on, oops, let's go back here, on stuff like the Claw, stuff like the Crusader, where bubble immunity seems to be a much bigger deal than losing part of the functionality of ECM for the market on those Tech 2 changes. Should I look at the interdictors? Excuse me, my throat is super dry, but I think we should. So because that's the other ships that got really nerfed. Is it like this? Advanced cruisers, and then we've got heavy interdiction cruisers. The Voter, nothing too crazy. Onyx, bit of a drop, nothing too crazy. If I'm checking the wrong ships, let me know. But I thought that these were the ships where they put up like a 500 MN, and then you use the bubble, the warp disruption fields, in order to make yourself like super small, and that way it was the perfect ship to roll wormholes in. Not seeing anything too crazy there either. So alright, despite checking the ECM ships, we don't see a major movement there, and I think that the lesson that we can take from that is that it's really the interceptor change that has had the biggest impact market-wise if we look at this week's EVE Talk. That's it for this one, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.